Hold on.
Welcome to the Real Estate Entrepreneurs Podcast.
Welcome to the Real Estate Entrepreneurs Podcast. And today I have my friend Alex Pardo, we've been trying to get this podcast done for quite a while, but for some reason, God said, not right now, but today. So, man, thank you so much, Alex, for coming up, brother, and for following up with me, by the way. It was great seeing you a few weeks ago at the family mastermind meetup that we had in Tampa.
Yeah, man.
And I can't wait until our audience gets to see who you are, man. You've done a lot of things in real estate, but let's start with how you got into real estate. When was it that you said, real estate, that may be something I want to do?
Yeah, first off, brother, man, it was great hanging out with you. You can't help but be around other high-achieving entrepreneurs that are just quality, good human beings. And it's hard not to walk out as a better version of yourself. So, man, it was great hanging out with you in Tampa. And I appreciate the opportunity to hop on here, man, and just kind of share my story with your audience and just connect with you, brother. So, yeah, man, look, I'll give you the brief modified version, but I'm super humbled in that I have an amazing family, parents that really sacrificed a lot for me as I was growing up, for my sister and I. And I didn't grow up rich. I also didn't grow up poor. So I don't have a rags to riches story. We grew up middle class. My parents made a decent living and they did the best they can, sacrificing for us. And I always saw them up late at night working, and that always just stuck with me. I remember my mother studying at a young age to be a nurse, and she'd go to bed past midnight and she'd be studying and reading because she wanted to provide a better life for her family. And I remember telling myself as a young kid, like, I don't know how I'm going to make it, but I'm going to make it. And I didn't even know what made it mean, right? I didn't have a particular vision, but I knew that I wanted to provide for my family. So, man, I went to college in Miami. I ended up getting a job in corporate finance and quickly realized that working for somebody was not going to allow me to create and to have the kind of impact I wanted and to provide for my family the way I wanted to. So I finished that program and I decided to go. I had no idea what I was going to do. I was 25 years old. I left my corporate job and I was moving back in with my parents. And brother, at 25 years old, single man, like, that's not exactly how I thought things would go, and I was very motivated to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And I said, you know what, I'm single. I'm in between jobs, right? Like, I don't have a career right now. Let me go backpacking around Europe. So for 3.5 months, a friend of mine and I, we went hopping from city to city. And it was when I was on the train in the Eurorail that I started to immerse myself in personal development. So I read so many books, from the classic Think and Grow Rich to Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I even think I read the Da Vinci Code during that point, but I read a lot of books. And I told myself that when I moved back to Miami, I wasn't going to go get a job. I was going to get into real estate. Prior to that, I had bought a course by Carlton Sheets called No Money Down.
I remember.
So, dude, I thought real estate was going to be me assuming people's loans. That's what I learned in that course, No Money Down.
Right. Subject to, right? So
subject to, assuming loans, all this old school stuff. So anyways, man, I had $997. I paid for a boot camp to learn how to market for real estate deals. It was a gentleman by the name of Dave Lindahl who was putting on an event in Atlanta, October of 2005. This is when I got started. And brother, I got home and I've always been somebody that I'm ready, fire, aim. So I took one of the letters, a pre-foreclosure letter, out of the manual that they gave me. And I went to Kinko's at the time and I just made photocopies. And I sent out my first pre-foreclosure direct mail campaign. And a little bit under 3 months later, I ended up closing. My first deal was a short sale. And we made $44,000 on that deal.
Wow.
Between myself and a partner.
Wow.
So that's how I got started in real estate, man.
Now, did you change the phone on the yellow letter or whatever, on the letter that you mailed out?
100%. Otherwise, I would have never gotten the call. But no, man, let me tell you something. Talk about imposter syndrome. I remember to this day the feeling of getting calls from adults that were significantly older than me, in their 40s, in their 50s, in their 60s. Here I am, 25 years old, 20, about to be 26, and people are calling me that they're distressed, financially distressed, that they're losing their home. And I'm
Right.
thinking to myself, who am I to be able to help these people? Like, who am I to be able to like walk them through this process of getting them out of pre-foreclosure and potentially offering a solution? But I had to fight through a lot of those like the inner critic, the inner voice.
Limiting beliefs, right? So
That's it.
what qualifies me to solve somebody else's problems, right? Or to give a solution to someone, because we're conditioned to think that we need a license for everything, or we need to go to
Yeah.
school for everything, right? Like, like maybe get a career in real estate investing at the university, and now that you're accredited from a university, now you can go solve problems, right?
Yeah.
And in our world, kind of, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't.
um so you closed on your first deal. What year is this, Alex? Like, how long ago is this?
Yeah. So this boot camp was October of 2005, and we closed January of 2006.
All right, so you started before I did, because I started in 2008.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you now tell me about those next 3 years, because those are some very interesting times.
Oh man, let me tell you. So you're 100% right. Very interesting. And I got slapped with a dose of reality in 2008, 2009. So I'll share with you the ups and the downs. So like I mentioned, man, like when I did that first deal, it was proof of concept for me. I gained a lot of confidence. And I think that first year in real estate, 2006, I want to say I may have closed 12, 13 deals. Right. I think I made somewhere between $100,000 and $160,000 is what I made in my first year in real estate. And I was off to the races. And I remember in 2007, I thought it was a good idea. I had been wholesaling in 2006. Those 12, 13 deals was all wholesale deals and a few short sales in there. I remember in 2007, I said, hey, it's a good time to jump into fix and flip. Beginning of 2007. So I don't jump into a small little tiny home for 70, 80, 90 grand. I bought a $500,000 home in Las Olas in the Fort Lauderdale area with a partner. We bought a home for $505,000. The plan was to put about 100 to 150 into it and sell it for just under 800. That was the plan in my head. And you know what happened in late 2007? Everything crashed. First of all, we went way over budget. The project took longer than anticipated. We didn't know how to manage crews and contractors. And so we made every mistake under the sun. Literally every mistake you could make, we made it. And then the crash happened. And I'm so fortunate, brother, that that deal didn't take me out, because between myself and a partner, we lost $102,000 out of our money. 102 grand. We had to come to the table to close that thing. And I'm fortunate that I had done well the first couple of years. But I remember my partner talked to me about like, hey, do I need to go BK? Do I need to file bankruptcy? And we somehow were able to come up with the money. And that was the best deal. I've closed, I don't know, man, somewhere north of 750, 800 deals. The number doesn't really matter, but I've closed a lot of deals. Sometimes people ask me like, what's the best deal you've ever done? Thinking I'm going to say it's like the last storage deal I did or a big wholesale. That was the best deal I've ever done, because up until that point, I always viewed coaches and mentors as an expense. In my head, I was like, oh, like I've already achieved some success. I can figure this out. I can keep doing that. And I know for a fact with certainty, if I would have had somebody there that was a few steps ahead of me and that had more knowledge and wisdom, I would have never gotten into that deal.
I'll tell you what, Alex, that point that you mentioned is pretty important, man, because like you, I started in real estate, but I didn't go to a boot camp or like, I was just too stubborn to quit. So I would read a book, and at the time, all I could do was read a book, right? And because there's no YouTube or anything like that that will explain things on how we do deals today. But up until 2017, that I was actually a full-time real estate investor, we were killing it. We were buying properties left and right. We raised a ton of private money. Actually, private money was coming to us. For some points, we didn't have to raise it at all. We just had money waiting for to be deployed. But when Harvey came in and I had all these properties in my hands, I have 47 loans, all interest only
Wow.
loans, right? It's millions of dollars what I'm talking about, right? Because I try to satisfy every lender that we had, we went belly up pretty much. And even though with that we went belly up, and I've told you the story before,
Mhm.
but I'm relating to what you're saying, like um we lived all the nightmares real estate investors can go through. Like we have properties foreclosed on. We have properties that we had to do a deed in lieu.
Yeah.
Um, we satisfied, I would say, about 99% of our loans, but there was always that 1% that you'll never satisfy, because especially when you have that large of inventory, the interest eats you alive, and
Yeah.
and then you put taxes on top of that, and I mean, it just becomes a mess, right? But the reason I mention this is because the people that are listening to this podcast, or that are watching somewhere on YouTube or Facebook or whatnot, you're gonna go through tough times. Luckily for you, that was early on in your career,
Yeah.
right?
That's
For
right.
me, it wasn't that much. It was almost like 10 years afterwards. So I had a lot of experience already. And look, I was doing 47 flips at a time. Like, that was a lot of work, a lot of crews, a lot of,
Oh yeah.
so, oh, and by the way, my ego was bigger than myself as well at the time.
Mm,
But I had made a mistake. And the one mistake that I had made is I had not surrounded myself with the right people. I was not in masterminds. I didn't. The first time I felt like I was not alone was in 2020, when I recently joined the family mastermind, which
yeah.
we're both part of.
Yeah.
When Ron LeGrand went in and got he didn't get on stage. He sat on a chair. I don't know if you were in that meeting, but he spoke on how he had lost north of $50 million, and he had them all on judgments against himself.
Hmm. I wasn't
And
at
when
that
I,
one.
yeah, that was a very small group, man. It was maybe like 60 of us. And when I heard that, I was like, wait a minute, that's exactly what I'm going through right now. Now, I didn't have the judgments, but I had lawsuits that were going to eventually become judgments if
Yeah.
I didn't address those, right? Um, and I went and reached out to Ron right after he spoke. I was like, hey, wait a minute, man. How do you handle all of this? And he's like, he looked at me and said, you're going through this, right? And I was like, yeah, my number is not as big as yours, but I am facing some of these setbacks. So I want to talk about things like this, Alex, because most of those podcasts that you listen to out there, it's all about wins.
That's it. Well, man, I gotta, first of all, you're so right. There's so much great content out there, but a lot of it is skewed towards the rainbows and the unicorns and the wins and the success. And I think that's great. That's to be celebrated. But if you want to hear a loss, that doesn't compare to the loss that was coming in the coming years. So,
So that was
2009,
for you. That was kind of like
God,
the entry into
yes,
what was happening. It was going to happen later on, right?
God was giving me the appetizer for what was to come.
He gave you
God
okay.
was warming. Yeah.
Let's talk about that, because I want to hear that.
Oh man, it's
Like I
such a
can see your body language changing already, brother. Like it's uncomfortable when we talk about
yeah.
things like this. But you know what, man? If I'm starting today in real estate in any lane, whether it's wholesaling or fix and flipping or commercial, like you're doing storages, and we'll get to that later on, right?
Mhm.
My question is, do I want a mentor that has nothing but wins, or do I want a mentor that's going to protect me from making some mistakes?
The latter, 100%. You want somebody who's got battle scars. You want somebody who's had challenges, who's been through the thick of it, because every time you get knocked down and you go through something really challenging, whether it's in business, whether it's in your personal life, you're either going to grow or you're going to like just not grow, and you're going to like just like, fetal position type of thing. And I think every time I've been through something extremely challenging, I can look back and say, man, I learned this lesson and that lesson, and now I'm wiser. I have the benefit of that experience. And now that I'm in a position where I've been able to coach people for a number of years, I can pass along some of that experience and say, hey, listen, I've been in those shoes or similar shoes, similar to how Ron LeGrand talked to you. Maybe your number wasn't as big, but the number may have been just as big because you were in the thick of it and you didn't necessarily know the way out. And so the fact that you were able to communicate and ask questions from somebody who had been through that, something to that magnitude, that's extremely valuable. And so 2009 came. I was living in Brickell. So I know that you're familiar with Brickell,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I know that you know Miami very well.
That's my second. That's my second. You know what, man? I say when people ask me all the time, "Where are you from?" Okay, I'm from Venezuela, right? But in the U.S., when I was in the U.S. Navy, I'm from Miami because that's where I lived most of my life in the U.S. until I moved to Texas. But yes, I'm very familiar with your hometown, brother.
So I lived in a building called Isola in Brickell Key. For anybody listening that's familiar with the Brickell area in Miami. And I remember I lived on the 9th floor and I went down to the lobby to the little mailboxes, the tiny little mailboxes, and I grabbed this particular day. My mailbox was overstuffed. It was like jam packed, and I didn't know why because I wasn't traveling. I had gotten the mail the day before. I said, okay, no big deal, whatever. I didn't think much of it. I grabbed it, got in the elevator, went up to the 9th floor. 902 was my apartment. I'll never forget. I dropped all the letters on like the little kitchen counter thing that I had. And I looked and I saw there was a letter that had like a green sticker, and it was, Ricardo, I'm not kidding you. It was probably about an inch thick, the letter. And it immediately, you know, when like you see something, you hear something, and it like something in your stomach like starts to turn, like it hits you like something's wrong, something's off. A couple minutes later, I go, curiosity, like just that got the best of me. I grabbed the letter, I turned it around, and it said certified mail, Internal Revenue Service. Instantly, my heart dropped. I'm like, this is not good. Like, why would I be getting a letter from the IRS that says certified mail? And it was about an inch thick. And it was page. When I opened it up, page after page after page. So let me fast forward to the end, and then I'll kind of recap the story. That letter was telling me that I hadn't filed my 2006 taxes, my 2007 taxes, and my 2008 taxes. And this was about April of 2009. So I certainly wasn't going to be in a position to file the 2009 taxes. And I owed the IRS, at the time, it was roughly $126,000, give or take. And if you know anything about owing money to the IRS, the penalties and interest can eat you alive. Eat you alive. Keep in mind, 2009, the crash had just happened. The economy was in the tanks. I wasn't doing nearly as many real estate deals as I was doing before. I may have been doing a few deals here or there, but like I was basically scraping by. I wasn't doing well financially. Mind you, at that time, I also owed $37,000 in credit card debt, business credit card debt, but I still owed the money. So here I am, $150,000 plus in the hole, single, not married, not making anywhere near 150 grand a year, had no plan, no idea how I was going to pay this off. And I remember for a good week to 2 weeks, man, like I retreated. I remember like clamming up and like, I don't want to use the word depression because it wasn't depression, but I was stuck. I didn't know like, how am I going to get out of this? And I remember the first time I called the IRS, and if you've ever called the IRS, it's a painful experience because you could be on hold for an hour and 20 minutes before you get an agent on the phone. And then you know how many times I was on hold for 48 minutes, an hour and a half that my call would drop? And I would have to go through the whole process again. And it was so painful. And finally, when I connected with an IRS agent and I wanted to inquire as to like how this happened, they verified that my taxes weren't filed. And I asked them, I said, well, are there any options? And they educated me on something called OIC, offer in compromise. Think of like a short sale on the money you owe the IRS. The problem was I had made too much money on paper the previous years that I didn't qualify for an OIC. So they put me on a payment plan, but they were not waiving or working with me on the penalties and the interest. Every single day that was climbing and climbing and climbing. Well, here's what happened. So why did I not file my taxes? 2006, I started doing real estate deals and I hired a bookkeeper and I completely abdicated the responsibility of the books and taxes to him. I didn't know how to do QuickBooks. I didn't know anything about books. Dude, I wanted to do real estate deals. That's it. I just wanted to do deals and make money.
Delegate the rest.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about running a business, so I hired a bookkeeper who knew QuickBooks. He set me up on QuickBooks, and I thought that he was supposed to be filing my taxes. And every year would pass by, and here I am, 2009, my taxes hadn't been filed. Completely my responsibility. So I went through a tough period in 2009, and in 2010, I hired a coach, not a real estate coach, but a coach, a business coach, business/life coach to help me through this process. By the way, to this day, one of my closest friends who I speak to on a weekly basis.
Wow.
That particular person saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and I think that's one of the things a really good coach does is they're able to step outside of the situation. Because, dude, I was in the thick of it, man. I didn't know how I was going to make this money. I remember setting up an appointment with a bankruptcy attorney in Coral Gables, and I specifically remember driving down Coral Way, and I started to cry. I literally started getting emotional because here I am. This was 2009. So how old was I? 29 years old. And I'm like, how can I be 29 years old driving to go meet with a bankruptcy attorney to figure out what the process is? And I just got super emotional. I felt like a loser. I just felt like the world was crashing down. Like that was the biggest adversity I had been through at that time. And I remember meeting with this bankruptcy attorney. His name was Kincaid. I'll never forget.
Wow.
And he looks at me and he saw that I was hesitant. I asked him questions, and then he says, okay, well, here are the next steps. Here's the paperwork. I think it was like a $1,500 like deposit to get started or whatever it was. And I remember I just froze. And after like 30 seconds, he goes, I know what you're thinking. And I said, out of curiosity, I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you're thinking that you shouldn't go through with this, but I can tell you that this is your only option. You're not going to be able to pay this off. Bro, like when he told me that, I felt my blood start to boil. And that was a gift that he gave me in that moment, because I told him, I'm not filing. I'm going to take care of this. I walked out of his office and I started driving home, and I started thinking about solutions. How am I going to do this? Because I'm not going to file BK. I'm not going to file bankruptcy. Remember getting on the phone with my coach and coming up with a plan. And dude, happy to say that within 3 to 3.5 years after that moment, I paid off every single penny, been debt-free ever since outside of our mortgage.
Wow. Amazing, right? So I did have not one, but like 3 attorneys tell me that I needed to file for bankruptcy as well. This is now somewhere around 2018 or 19. And what I remember is I was like, man, if I file for bankruptcy, I'm going to damage a lot of people's retirement accounts. I'm going to have to give up all the properties right away. Like, even though I ended up giving up some of them at the end, because I just didn't have any oxygen anymore, right? And you swim and swim and swim, but you never get to shore, and you try to do things and you try to make everybody happy. I think that was one of the mistakes I made at the beginning, was trying to make all my lenders happy, right? And it's never going to happen. It doesn't matter how hard you try. Some of them will always be discontent. Till this day, some of those guys sometimes come up on these videos and post things, and I'm like, whatever, man, get over it. You were lending, you were getting 10%, you got the property back, go figure things out on your own as well. Because, we both were betting on something. Who how can I expect a hurricane to change the trajectory of our business?
Yeah.
It's very hard. You can plan all you want for that, but it wasn't the hurricane what damaged our business. What damaged our business was our crews walking away from us.
Yeah. People, that's one thing, Ricardo, that people that get into real estate, like whenever you borrow, right? And I'm not the anti-debt guy, right? But whenever you borrow, you're taking on a certain level of risk, right? Debt equates to risk
But
in
it's
some way,
both
shape, or form.
the borrower and the lender.
It's a partnership, 1,000%.
It is. But sometimes people don't understand that sometimes you lose in business.
Mm-hmm.
You got to learn how to lose and move on, period. Cut your losses and move on, right? Like you said, you went and you had that closing where you had to bring $100,000 to get rid of the property. What were you doing that day? You were cutting your losses and moving on. Otherwise, are you gonna get latched onto that one deal?
Yeah,
that went sideways. You know what, man? Cut your losses and move on, right? So now I'm interested in, like, once you left that office and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna be a solution provider for my own challenges.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do to dig yourself out of the hole?
First of all, I had to get my mind right. That was the first thing. I had to get out of victim mode. I had been operating in victim mode. Like, how did this happen to me? How could this person have done that to me? I was playing the blame game instead of blaming the only person that was responsible. That was myself. Right. And I think that's one of the keys that I find in successful people is that they own it. They take responsibility. There's a high level of accountability. And I think just in general in society, like that's lacking, man. Like think about politics and religion and this, and like there's all this division and it's all finger pointing and this person. Imagine what would happen if everybody just looked at themselves and owned their mistakes. And then the key is like Monday morning quarterback the situation. In other words, when you make a mistake, look back and say, hey, where did I go wrong? Where are the lessons? And how can I use this to make me better going forward? Right. And I find that a lot of people just don't do that. Too many people are blaming and pointing the finger at others. Right. Like those lenders that are still bitter, that are looking at you like at the end of the day, it was their decision to lend the money. Now, don't get me wrong. It sucks to have a deal go south or
Of
lose
course.
money. That
Nobody
nobody's
wants deals
saying,
to go south, right?
Exactly. Nobody's saying that's supposed to be easy. But at the end of the day, if they looked inside and said, hey, at the end of the day, I'm going to own this. Like maybe it was in my underwriting or maybe it was this or that, then you can move on. But when you're stuck in the past, when you're stuck in whatever situation didn't go your way, to me, my belief is that you're not able to fully grow from that experience. Right.
Yeah.
And so, man, I dove into real estate. I dove into what I knew and I didn't let the excuse of the market hold me back. And it was interesting what happened to me when I flipped the switch in my head and I said, hey, I know the market's tough right now and I can still do deals. Guess what started happening, dude? I started doing deals. I wasn't buying the excuse that the economy was in the toilet and that this and that. I was just committed. And I think that was one of the key learning lessons from that is that when you decide and you commit, regardless of what's going on around you, it's going to be hard to stop you if you really truly want whatever it is you're after. And so, man, I just started doing deals. I started doing deals. And little by little, I would throw money at the IRS, throw money, chunks. Every time I would do a deal, big chunk. Until about 3.5 years later, I eliminated 100% of the debt. No offering compromise, no short, nothing. I paid it all off. And I learned a valuable lesson. So
that was all throughout to like 2012, 2013.
Exactly right. Exactly. And then 2013 came and I hired my first acquisition person. And then we started ripping it with REOs. 2013 through 16, we were doing so many REO real estate owned deals here in South Florida. And then that's when I started to like ascend and I started to I have just learned and grown. And that's when I started building a team and doing more deals.
And now were you flipping at all or was just all wholesale?
It was pretty much all wholesale. Every now and then I would take on a project, but it was a tiny percentage of my world. 98% of what I was doing was wholesaling.
Wow. Yeah. Now, you wholesaled all the way until like what, 20?
Beginning of 2020. Yeah.
2020.
So I had been in business for, at that point, 2006 to 2014 years. And I remember in 2018, I had a conversation with my wife and I said, thankfully we do very well. We make 6 figures a year from wholesaling, but where's the cash flow? Where are the assets? And I found myself stuck in this rat race of just chasing deals and doing deal after deal after deal. And I said, I feel like I'm playing the wrong game. So we started buying single family rentals in Cleveland. We started building a small rental portfolio. And then I quickly realized that there's nothing passive about building a rental portfolio.
Very active.
And it came with its own set of headaches. And after about 4 or 5 single family rentals, I'm like, I don't think this is for me either. Like, yes, can I build wealth and generate cash flow with a rental portfolio? Sure. But with how much brain damage, it just felt like another job, right? Even though I had a property management company and I had the right people, it still felt like a job. And I was coaching somebody at the time, Ricardo, who owned a storage facility. And I got an inside look into that asset class. And I saw cash flow. I saw time freedom. I saw financial freedom. I saw that he wasn't dealing with tenants and toilets and trash. and he had automation in the business. So the facility was thousands of miles away and he lived where he lived. And I got really intrigued. And I remember in 2019, I had a team of 9 people. My overhead was about 40 to 45 grand a month between the marketing and the office and the staff and the this and the that. And I remember in 2019 mentally saying, I'm done. I'm done. In fact, I was in Collective Genius, CG, which is probably the biggest real estate mastermind out there. Jason Medley, like great guy, great organization. And I remember going up in front of a room of my peers and sharing how I was mentally burned out with the business and I was thinking of shutting it down. That was the first time publicly. And I can't tell you how many people in CG after my talk came up to me and said, dude, I know exactly what you're going through because I'm in the same boat. And in 2020, when COVID came, it was a blessing. I was like, you want to know what? This is the perfect time to exit this business. I don't want to shift. I don't want to change things. I'm done with this. And it probably June of 2020, I had shut everything down. I sold off some of the assets of the business. I didn't sell the business because I didn't build the business to be sellable.
Well, you know, I would say, man, wholesaling businesses are really not sellable.
I don't think so either.
I mean, what are you selling? A marketing system?
Yeah.
You know, so I doubt that. I mean, some people argue that I can sell my wholesaling business. Okay, maybe one-offs. Okay, or maybe you found somebody that didn't understand what they were buying. You can learn marketing wholesaling on YouTube today. So
Cody Hoffheim, a mutual friend of ours from Joe Homebuyer, he's the only one that I know that has successfully been able to take like the franchise model.
Different, right? So
franchise model, right?
So does Jamil Damji with Astro Flipping and Keegley, and so there are guys. You know, We Buy Ugly Houses, Homevestors, which was the first one ever. There are models out there. I'm not gonna say whether they're good or that they're just different models, because some people like the franchise model. Okay, those are the options, right?
Right.
So now, when you shut down your wholesaling business, I remember you came out on your podcast and you made an announcement, and I think I bumped into you also in Tampa at the time.
I remember.
Once you shut that down, what was your next step? Like, did you take some time off? Did you just, I'm just gonna take it easy for now, I'm gonna enjoy my life, or did you dive right into like commercial real estate?
No, really good question. I wanted to dive into the next thing, and Steve Cook, who is the founder of Life and Air, who is somebody who's really close to me. He's coached me for a number of years. I remember him. I was hopping on a coaching call with him, and I told him like, hey, I think here are my plans. I think I want to get into storage. And this was June, July of 2020. And he gave me some super valuable advice that I'm glad I took. He said, Alex, you've been building this thing for years and years and years. He's like, fortunately, I had income coming in from other sources. And he says, take some time off. Take time off to reflect, to like just enjoy this time with your family. Think about planning your next steps, your next 5 moves, like Patrick Bet-David talks about in his book. And I'm so glad I did it, because I was wired to go want to conquer the next mountain. And if I'm being honest with you and the audience, I was too concerned about what others would think about my decision to shut down my wholesaling business. At that time, I was in my head, like, I remember telling my wife and a few friends, like, people are going to think that I shut this down because of COVID. And I didn't like how that looked. And this is the BS going on in my head.
Right. It's the impostor syndrome. It's like, because you identified as a real estate investor, right?
That was the problem. The problem was I was too attached to my identity of a podcast host, the Flip Empire Show, and the real estate investor, and the person that was co-running Ascend, the mastermind, and this and that. And at the end of the day, what I learned through that experience is that, number one, nobody gives a crap about me. Like, they're not thinking about me, right?
No, and your friends will support you regardless of what you do.
That's right.
You open up a restaurant, I'm showing up. Hey, what's up? Like what do you recommend here, Alex? You know?
Yeah, that's right. But it was the stories that I was creating in my head, and I think that's really valuable for people watching and listening. Is like, ask yourself if the stories you're telling yourself are serving you or holding you back. And I was feeding myself BS that wasn't true. And so, anyways, when I got through that, it was late 2020, December 2020. I specifically remember I'm going to commit to self storage, and this is going to be my focus. So,
Um, so when did you actually start looking at storages? I know you discovered it with your
yeah.
own what do you call it? Your
Mhm.
mentee, but when did you say, okay, I'm gonna go? Did you look at multifamily as well, and or
Yeah.
maybe strip centers or things like that? Like,
Right.
what was your thinking process so you could choose
Yeah.
one asset
No, I'm
class?
glad you asked that. So, in between June and December of 2020, when I was taking time off, I was researching multifamily and storage. Those were the two commercial asset classes. I always assumed I was going to transition into multifamily, but then I started asking myself, like, I still don't want to deal with tenants and toilets, and I don't want to deal with complicated renovation. And I started to do some research at the time. Obviously, we didn't have Chat GPT. At least I didn't have access to Chat GPT at that time. But I started to do a lot of research, and I found facts that would say things like self storage is the most recession resistant asset class. And self storage has the lowest default rate of all the commercial asset classes. And I started to come across things that made storage seem very, very appealing to me. No tenants and no toilets and no trash, and automation can run a lot of the business for you. I love the fact that storage is a business with the benefits of real estate. It's an actual business. My very first deal, I got an SBA loan, Small Business Administration. You can't
Right.
go to the SBA to go buy a single family house, right?
No,
Um,
they don't
no,
like it.
it's not a business. So anyway, I looked at multifamily, but ultimately I said, man, storage feels very appealing. It aligns with my vision and my goals. So I only researched multifamily and storage, and ultimately decided. And by the way, I felt like everybody and their mom was jumping into multifamily at that time. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna go a different path.
Different
I'm gonna go
direction.
self
Yeah.
storage. And I'm glad I made that decision, even though multifamily is, of course, a great asset class. But for me, storage just aligned with my specific goals. So I started educating myself in December, and January 1st, 2021 came. I said, hey, enough education, implementation. Let's take what I've learned. So I sent out my first direct mail campaign. Direct mail has always been my bread and butter. In fact, I'm about to record a YouTube video on a letter that produced $150,000 storage wholesale fee.
Wow.
So anyways, January 2021 is when I said, hey, let's start having conversations with storage owners. Let's figure this out. And end of April is when I went under contract on my first facility, which was a 43,000 square foot facility in Jackson, Mississippi.
Nice. And there you go. You live in Miami, Florida, and your first facility is in Jackson. Where do you have facilities
I
nowadays?
just sold 80,000 square feet. I sold 2 facilities in Jackson, Mississippi, and that's its own show. Jackson, Mississippi is a challenging market.
Right.
Thankfully, I bought it right, and that's a key lesson: is you can make a lot of mistakes. You can buy in the wrong area, but if you buy right, that can cover up a lot of mistakes. So I
Right.
just sold 80,000 square feet in Jackson. I own another one in Amelia Island, Florida. And then I have a small equity position in another facility in Canton, Ohio with a couple of friends. And then now I get to partner with coaching clients. So we're about to go under contract on 2 facilities, one in Tennessee, another one in Illinois, which is pretty awesome.
What's the ideal size of a facility that you're looking for?
Yeah. For me, again, this is not a right or a wrong. It's just, I think one of the things I take clients through is getting crystal clear on their storage buy box. So for me, when I got into storage, I had the belief that it was just as much time, effort, and energy to close a big deal as it was a small one. So I started looking for facilities that were between 20,000 and 50,000 square feet. So to me, anything between 20 and 70,000 square feet is like the sweet spot. Why? Because the REITs, the real estate investment trust, the ones that own public storage, extra space, they're going to
Right.
operate in, generally speaking, big cities, metropolitan cities. And they're not going to be
Right.
buying a 40 or 50,000 square foot facility. They're looking for 90,
Okay.
100,000 square feet and up. So for me, that's a nice sweet spot. And I've also experienced at the very small facilities, 5 to 15,000 square feet, while you can do well with them, I'm not saying you can't, they're too small where you can't put a third-party management company in place. And I like facilities that generate enough revenue where I can get a third-party management company that has a call center, and then I just hire a part-time boots on the ground person, and that allows me time freedom. I might spend an hour a week on the storage portfolio, and that's because I have a third-party management center, a boots on the ground, and they have a call center.
Nice. And usually those facilities that you look for, how do they value?
Yeah.
Like, like what is the purchase
Mhm.
price, or like how much does it cost to buy one of
Yeah.
them?
So the lowest for me, anyways, the facilities that I've got under contract with or bought, the lowest has been 400, and then I bought one facility for 2.1. Which I got on
Okay.
90% seller financing, and we can talk about that. But one of the things people need to understand if you've never looked at commercial real estate is that it's very different. And Ricardo, I know you know this, but it's very different than single family. The value is not based on comps, on comparable sales. The value is based on the income that the asset produces, NOI, net operating income. So,
Mm-hmm.
so the idea here is we get to force appreciation, right? When we buy a single family home, if the houses in our area start selling for a lot less, there's not much you're going to be able to do to get a significant bump in the value, generally speaking, right? In commercial,
Right.
I can do things like raise the rates, right? Which, by the way, when I was comparing multifamily to storage, multifamily, you're locked into, generally speaking, a year-long lease. The tenant's rental rate is the tenant's rental rate. In storage, I can adjust the rates every month if I wanted to.
Oh man, I get letters all the time. I have 2 units that I rent for stuff that I got, and I'm not surprised that I get every 6 months a new letter say, "Hey, your storage rates just went up," right?
And that's
And
what we do, by the way. We
I'm
don't
like,
raise the
"Wow."
rates every month. We typically wait 7 to 9 months before we raise the rates. But
Right.
the point is that you have a lot more flexibility. These are month-to-month rentals. And so that's one of the things I really like. That was very appealing to me, that we get to force appreciation. Storage also has a lot of profit centers. Like, we collect revenue on late fees, auction fees, lock fees, cleaning fees, 24/7 gate access fees. I mean, and all those fees trickle down to the bottom line. And again, what is our goal? Our goal is to increase the net operating income, which has a multiple effect on the value of the facility when you apply a cap rate. And we're kind of getting a little bit into the weeds, but if you were to apply a $5 a month bump on each unit times 200 units, you might think to yourself, oh, great, an extra $1,000 a month. No. It's not just $1,000 a month. When you take that $12,000 a year in increase in value, and then you add like an 8 cap to that, you've increased that facility by $96,000 in value. Like, it has that type of multiple effect on the value of the facility. So, and by the way, dude, I'm not a good rehabber, right? I suck at rehabs. I don't have your skill set. There's no way I could run 46 projects. And it's
Look, I thought I was a good rehabber, and I thought I had it figured out, but obviously at the end of the day, you're managing grown people, and it's a very challenging business when you're managing adults. And especially the contractors, that not the professional ones, but like the labor, like the man, they got an excuse for a solution. They drink on the job.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, so this is a different type of business, because you hire engineers to build a new facility for you if you want to add another metal building.
yeah,
This is not Jose that you picked up in Home Depot that's going to go build that building for you. It's an engineer with plans and approved permits
yeah.
and all that. So I'm very familiar with the storages, because I do have a plan to build a boat and
Nice,
storage
man. Boat and
RV
RV.
here in
Yeah,
Texas. Yeah,
I love it.
we have the land, all kinds of things already.
Amazing.
So I'm very familiar with the valuation and how you do all those things. But my plan is to do it cash. It's like straight up cash, and then go refinance it once it's all stabilized.
Love it.
But now, are you coaching people today on how to do this,
Yeah,
Alex?
man. I've been fortunate that I discovered coaching back in 2012, 2013, and it gives me a lot of joy and fulfillment to pour into people. I mean, that's why I started the Flip Empire Show back in 2016. I didn't have a plan to monetize the podcast. I kept having conversations, sharing my experience with people. And I thought to myself, man, I wish that was recorded because I feel like it could help more people. So I've always had a desire
Right.
to want to impact people positively. And so about a little bit over a year ago, I launched a storage coaching program where I get to now combine my love for coaching and helping people with my focus in business, which is storage. I've learned a lot in the last 4+ years. And so, yeah, man, now it's cool because I get to pour into people. I get to partner with them on their first deal. And it's been a lot of fun, man.
Good deal. So how can people get in contact
Yeah,
with
brother.
you?
Thank you for the opportunity, man. The Flip Empire Show, which by the way, I just announced today on social media, it's going to be
I
rebranded.
saw that.
I'm rebranding after almost 9 years and 800 episodes. We're rebranding to Storage Wins. So yeah, it's going to be more of a focus around self-storage. And man, I'll tell you this: if anybody is interested in learning more about storage, I have some free, valuable resources like no opt-in page. No, you don't have to jump through hoops. Just text the word storage and then put Ricardo in parentheses so that I know that you came from Ricardo's show to
Right.
305-318-6213. 305-318-6213. And we'll send you a Dropbox with a bunch of like storage training, some resources that I think you'll find valuable. So yeah.
Brother, thank you so much for being here today, man. I appreciate you. You have an amazing story, and I hope you get to help a lot of people get into the storage business. Moving forward, they're in great hands working with you, Alex. Guys, don't forget to hit share, like, and subscribe. We have a 10 Growth March 14th and 15th in Houston, Texas. I hope that I can get to see you there. We'll see you on